Hello everyone, welcome back to Chapter 4. This is Dr. Kofelt. In this section, we're going to calculate molar mass in order to calculate mass percent from a chemical formula. So the chemical formula is what we use to figure out the molar mass. In that chemical formula, we have a certain number of elements. So like we have a certain number of carbons and hydrogens and oxygens, and the percent of each one of those elements is equal to the molecular mass of that element divided by the total mass of the compound times 100. So sometimes because of rounding and calculating issues, it may be 99.9. That's okay. Okay, that's just a rounding thing, so don't worry about that. So what we have to do is to calculate the mass percent of chlorine, in this case, in Freon 112. Wow, that brings back memories. I used to make that. This was a refrigerant gas we used to use back in the 80s before we decided it was destroying the ozone layer. So anyway, it has a formula of C2Cl4F2. And it wants to know how much Cl is in there. So what percent of that whole thing, Freon 112, is chlorine. So the way you do these problems is you set it up just like you're just doing a molar mass. So we had the C, we have two of those. Cl, we have 4 of those, and F, we have 2 of those. And then we, if you recall, multiply them by their molar, the atomic mass of each one. I do use 35.5 because chlorine is right in the middle, so that's why I do that. And then fluorine is 19. Okay? All right. So 19 times 2 is 38. 4 times 35.5 should be 142. And 2 times 12 is 24. And so when I add all that together, I get 204 grams of C2Cl4F2 per mole of C2Cl4F2. Okay, so, and the reason I do it this way is because if I've already calculated the chlorine, how much chlorine's in there, then all I have to do is put it in there. So the percent chlorine is going to be equal to 142 grams of chlorine divided by 204 grams of the whole thing times 100. And so the percent chlorine is going to be 69.6%. And notice I kind of arbitrarily use 3 significant figures in that because it depends on how many you use over here. But you know, your atomic mass is technically infinity, so if you want to put 70%, that's okay as long as I see how you calculated it. All right, so percent chlorine in Freon 112 is 69.6%. And that makes sense because 142 is the biggest number in there. And so of course I gave you some to practice on, so you can calculate the mass percent of those. And then the last one, for more practice, you're going to have to figure out the formula of sodium oxide, which you're very capable of doing, and then the percent of sodium in that. So the one thing that also is the chemical formulas give us the relationships between the number of atoms and molecules or the number of moles. And these relationships can be used to also figure out the percent compositions and things. So when you see percent, I want you to think of what a percent is. because that will help you quite a bit as you go through this. Because 39% of sodium means you have 39 grams of sodium for every 100 grams of whatever it's in, sodium chloride. Because that's what percent is. It's how many out of 100. So 39 grams of sodium out of 100 grams is the same thing as 39%. But when we write it like this, that allows us to use it as a conversion. All right, so from now on when you see percent, think of it in those terms, okay? All right, so I have 2.4 grams of sodium, and it's telling me that that's really, I should consume less than that a day, and we all know we consume a whole lot more than that, which is not good for us. But 2.4 grams of sodium, and then so how much sodium chloride could I consume and get that amount of sodium? So I've got grams of sodium. Over here I've got something with grams of sodium in it. So 39 grams of sodium is going to go on the bottom so that I can cancel those out of 100 grams of sodium chloride. And those two canceling is going to give me how many grams of sodium chloride I can actually have to get the 2.4 grams of sodium, and that turns out to be 6.2 grams of salt of the sodium chloride. So the only thing you got to remember with these is that you're going to write that 39% as how many out of 100. And then you use it as a conversion factor. And then I'll give you a couple of more so that you can do that. All right, and that's it for mass composition.